So I want to get your thought process of all these awards, because there have been a lot of renaming of awards, things shifting.
Redesigns.
Yeah, the redesign is pretty cool, huh? Like I love that Michael
Did you
Jordan.
see? You got to see them, right? Like most of them are a silhouette. Basically, I'm trying to think of the right word. Silhouette, sort of the player in crystal, encased in crystal. So you've got a guy. The Olajuwon Defensive Award he's in a defensive position, and it mimics Olajuwon. Everyone except Jordan. We did a whole story on this. And the designer talked about it. Jordan didn't want the MVP award to look like him because he wanted the player to be able to see themselves in it. So we wrote the story, and you can find there was a longer interview, I think, at the Charlotte Observer with his name is Mark Smith, the designer, one of the Jordan brand designers. Really interesting. You would find it interesting, Corey, because it's an interesting description of how the artist saw this and what he wanted it to represent and what Jordan wanted it to represent.
Yeah, the how closely they work together. I think that is really cool. You know, that virtue of being able to work with Michael Jordan and Jordan Brand, I suppose, to make this MVP trophy, and like all the symbolism behind it, in addition to what you said. But also, I like at the beginning, at the bottom, the foundation is all rough hewn, and then it gets refined on the way up, and to this crystal, the concept of, you know, the journey of a player from going into the league as a unrefined product to becoming a crystal, the best. I thought it was pretty interesting. There are questions though about, you know, I don't want to use the word, I guess, justification, but, you know, why these names to these trophies? Especially, I understand Michael Jordan is, you know, quite arguably the greatest of all time, and for many people, he is the greatest of all time. But Kareem Abdul-Jabbar does have 6 MVPs, and Michael Jordan does have 5. So, you know, where do you stand on these arguments?
Yeah. By the way, I just like that I can now say Kareem has the most Jordans. I'm not even it's kind of a weird. I don't know. I wasn't as, I know that they're trying to harken back to history. I was less, I don't know, in some ways less excited or moved by that than some. I think some people really got into it, but there were a few that shook my. John Havlicek never won the 6th Man of the Year. It didn't exist, but he never won 6th Man of the Year. And what about Kevin McHale? Like, he won a couple of
Frank Ramsey. Right?
Yeah,
that's where I was thinking, because Frank Ramsey, like Red Auerbach, basically he was the one who created the concept of a 6th man.
Yeah, so I thought that one was a little strange. They created a new award, the Jerry West Clutch Player Award, which.
What does that mean?
I don't know, and I have had this. I have been a voter in the past. I have been the past 4 or 5 years. I am hopeful that the NBA allows me the responsibility and honor and privilege of doing that again. And this lack of sleep and stress it causes me every year. I take it far too seriously and spend way too much time on those. But yeah. But I was talking with somebody about that. Like, I'm not quite sure. Like, how are you defining clutch? And the coaches are going to pick a pool of players. I don't know how big that pool is, and then a media panel, and I don't know if it's a separate media panel or the media panel that votes on MVP and Rookie of the Year and everything. I don't know what. I guess my question is just, I've got to think about it. Like, is that just? It's not just making game-winning shots. What Damian Lillard does, what Luka Doncic does in the clutch, is create those shots for themselves and others. Like, and how do you factor that in? And is it fair to a guy on a really good team who's, you know, I'm not in that many clutch games because we keep blowing people out? Like, I'm not sure. What does it mean to you? Like, what? I'm going to have to spend some time thinking about this.
Yeah, you know, I think I guess in traditional sense of what does the word clutch mean, it's like, okay, well, we have a last second shot. Who do we want to take that shot? You know, I feel like that is pretty universal across all basketball. You know, it's, well, in middle school, who's taking the shot, college, high school, you know, pros, Olympics, you know where the ball is going. And even though you know Michael Jordan's going to take that shot, you know, to win the finals, you can't stop him. Like, that's the definite. Like, you know, Larry Bird, like, he's gonna tell you, I'm actually gonna catch it here. I'm gonna do 2 dribbles and shoot off the elbow for this game winner. You know, and like, try to stop me if you can. Like, to me, those guys are perfect examples of clutch. Obviously, Jerry West, like the only guy to ever win Finals MVP and lose, which is a dubious distinction. But you understand, like I think that Finals, I mean, it's crazy. He was averaging like 40 points a game, like it was unbelievable. But anyways, my point is that like with clutch, I think it comes down to, I'm getting the ball. Can you stop me?
Yeah.
Good luck. But I think there's actually a stat, like if you go to NBA.com, you can look at all the stats, and and they actually have one called clutch, and like clutch stats.
Clutch stats for teams and clutch stats for players. Their standard breakdown is a game within 5 points in the last 5 minutes, but you can lower those numbers. You can make it last 3 in the last 3 minutes, last minute of play, and within 3 points or 1 point. Like you can kind of play around with that. And I think that helps, I think, define it too a little bit. But I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. For me, it's even the teams that run the Utah Jazz, and I think this was part of their playoff issues, like under the previous, I don't want to say regime, but like the way that the Gobert Mitchell era was, they had a great system. They ran this system. That system in the final 2 minutes of a tight game is Donovan Mitchell. It is right. Like, and is he good? And Donovan has proven so far in Cleveland to kind of be up to that, but like that's becomes who it is. It's like, I can start to take away when I really defend, I can block some of this stuff off. So how are you still getting a bucket? And if I get the ball to Kevin Durant against the Nets late in the game, how are you going to stop Kevin Durant from getting that bucket?
The answer is you're not. Like same with like I was watching all the Spurs. Huge Spurs fan. Go Spurs, go! By the way, some big wins for the Spurs.
Just good wins this week. Quality wins.
Some good wins. Last second wins against some good. I mean,
Vassell, I'm telling you, I like Vassell.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, every once in a while, I just gotta throw in the San Antonio connection while we have it. So good, go Spurs. But I will say, I was watching. They're doing a really interesting thing. It's the 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
And they're doing this, like, there's this huge, like, mini series, and it's all about Spurs history, which is great for me because I watch it and call my dad. so it's like, imagine like watching a 30 for 30 like every week and then calling your dad and then like finding out like all the other stuff too, which is really cool. So but one of them was about Captain Late. And that was James Silas, and talk about like clutch, because I didn't get to really watch him play.
Yeah.
This was, like Dallas Chaparral's like NBA merger, and he was injured in the NBA. So like he didn't really get to showcase, like the kind of player he was, but they called him Captain Late because he took over games late. Like this was, I think John Morant is a perfect example of that as a young player in the NBA right now, where fourth quarter, overtime, like Ja's taking every shot, he's going to score 12 straight points and he's going to win. Like he's going to win the game for you. Like that was James Silas back in the day. So like those kind of players for me like embody what clutch is. Of course, Larry Bird is on that list, and Michael Jordan, of course, like has to be like number one. But
Kobe,
you always think about like clutch is that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And by the way, not every team does it. Not every player does that. You get the Bucks in the clutch. Giannis is setting picks for Chris Middleton. Middleton is the guy with the ball in his hands, not always shooting it, but he's the playmaker for them in the clutch. It's not Giannis anymore.
And that's a really interesting point too, going to the most clutch player, because it doesn't always have to be the franchise player. Like in that scenario, you're right. Chris Middleton has the ice in the veins. He's taking the last shot. Remember that Cleveland team that won the championship? Kyrie took the last shot. So Kyrie was that clutch player for them. So yeah, I do think that's a really interesting way to think about like the award. It kind of opens up. Do you think it opens up to the defensive realm as well? Remember when Bam Adebayo had that incredible block in the playoffs?
I think it'd be hard to win that way. Like you can get great highlights, and I think I'm going to go blank. There was one this week where somebody won with a block at the rim. Those are great, but I don't know that you could. I don't know that opportunity would come up often enough where you would be able to say, I'm Mr. Clutch. I'm the clutch winner because every time we were in a clutch situation, I locked down the opposing team's bet. There's great plays like that, and it would matter. By the way, it would really add to your case, by the way, wouldn't it, though? If you had one of those blocks or some of those plays, and by the way, I've also hit a bunch, like it would add to your case.
That would be like the LeBron James argument. Like how many times have we seen him fly out of nowhere, pin something against the ball, and then also have 30-something points and all the way to the winning shot, So I think in that sense, there's a lot of elements to this clutch award, which I think is probably the most interesting. Like the biggest variance, I believe, is like what you're saying. One, how do you define clutch? And then two, I think once you figure it out, there are so many aspects to that award that it could go to, I think, a lot. The pool is like, I know the coaches are selecting it, but it could be a very interesting group of players, from like franchise players to maybe 6-man type of players to like, the 1A players. So it's going to be a really interesting group of people.
And you got to get those guys need help. By the way, like I've been watching the Mavericks lately. It gets late in the game. People are throwing double and triple teams at Luka, and he is making the right basketball play and passing out of it to guys who aren't finishing. Like, I feel bad for him, but he's like, you're going to have if I'm going to load up on LeBron James at the end of the finals game and it leaves Kyrie open, Kyrie's still got to hit the shot, man.
He's still got to hit the shot. Yeah. I also want to mention just a couple more of these, because like the whole concept of these awards, I'm not a big award guy. Personally, I don't really understand like ceremony or the awards. That's just me. But
wait for awards season, baby. I'm just gonna be texting you like, "Hey, man."
Yeah, I mean, it's just like win the championship. I guess I'm a very simple dude. It's like, what's the most important thing? The team success. But the individual awards are cool because, like, I think one thing that the NBA is doing a really good job of is reintroducing history. Because I think the important thing about this time is, and like I said, I'm doing this because of the Spurs as well, as I learn about Spurs history in greater detail and greater depth. We're talking about the internationalization of the game. Most of the best players in the NBA now are becoming more and more international, if not, like the top 3 or 4, probably all international. So because of this, like you end up having, I think, to re-educate, not just, of course, domestic fans who are like under the age of 18, like who is Larry Bird, but for, a kid growing up in Argentina watching Manu Ginobili's Hall of Fame speech, like now you have a global fan base that you need to reintroduce. Who was Wilt Chamberlain? Did you know that he won the MVP the same year he won Rookie of the Year? Like crazy, like who is George Mikan, like the first superstar? Like George Mikan, like was the first guy to inspire like Bill Russell. You know what I'm saying? Like these stories of history in the game, like Hakeem Olajuwon, his nickname was the Dream, but he's one of the most like low key superstars. So like, will this next generation of global fans know who these people are? I think that's why this award timing is so interesting for me, and less about like like the direct, the direct correlation. Like Jerry West is the logo; he needs to have an award named after him.
By the way, I'm with you on that. I think the league is starting to understand it needs to embrace its history in a way I'm not sure it always has in the past, and I'm not sure. Like baseball's always done a good job of it. I'm not sure if the NFL and every other and other sports have done as well with it.
Yeah, because I think domestically, I think the NBA does a very good job, especially with like the NBA legends, of keeping the former players involved and engaged at a high level. But I do think the international question, because it's not like the All-Star game isn't happening in Mexico City and in Dubai and in Shanghai. You know what I'm saying? The All-Star game's happening in Salt Lake City or in Cleveland, or in LA or New Orleans. So I think that the NBA awards, doing it now and doing it in such a big way, in such a public way, is a great way to engage the global audience and fan base in a way that reintroduces the history to them.